All right, this is the APEL basement bathroom. The framing is complete, and I'll give you a quick tour of that. So the space here was actually relatively easy to frame from a keeping things level and square perspective. You can see that the space runs in between two steel beams. One is back there behind that drain line, and then the other one is over there. And obviously the floor joists carry all the load, so nothing in here is structural. And both of those steel beams are perfectly straight, square with one another. Two walls were already existing, so the wall there and the wall there. Turns out when I cut into the walls, the framing was already done for the doors with the kings, the jacks, and the headers. So it was relatively easy to just order the doors, slide them into place, shim, level, and screw them in. So for this main back wall, it is a 2x6 underneath the steel beam, bolted in with bolt and torque washers. As you can see, you probably can't see any of the nuts that are up there. I went with a 2x6 instead of 2x4 here for a couple reasons. One, it allows me some overhang up here between the steel beam, which was helpful for doing the soffit. And additionally, I had to frame around this existing vent piping, which was already put in. The shower line, the toilet flange, all going to an ejector pump. So I had to frame around all of this drain piping, and you can't, I don't know if you can tell here, but the vent piping is not square underneath the steel beam. It's a little angled. So as a result, even though my top plate and bottom plate are perfectly plumb underneath the steel beam, the vent piping does not go through. You can see I had a little bit of space here going around, and then up here I pretty much had no wood available and had to frame around this vent piping. So that was primarily the challenge and the reason for using a 2x6 wall under here. Unfortunately, the building code still requires 16 inches on center, so had to get a little creative with the stud spacing to avoid having to redo too much. Ended up having to stick frame pretty much everything in place just because of the low ceilings. There's not a lot of space to build your wall on the floor and bring it up. I went with construction screws instead of a nail gun for a couple reasons. One, I don't own a nail gun, and one fewer tool to buy. And also, if I screwed anything up, I was able to unscrew it and redo it. You'll see here a couple times I had to do that. Had to move this stud over. Had to move a couple here when the building inspector told me that I can't do 24 inches on center on a 2x6 wall, even on a non-structural one. So that's that. Here you can see the shower alcove framed. Made sure to get everything nice and plumb so that when the shower goes in, everything is nice and square and plumb. Obviously the bottom plates are all pressure treated. To fasten the bottom plates, I went with Tapcons as opposed to ram sets, again, for a couple of reasons. One, I don't own a ram set. And also, again, if I ever screwed something up, it can always be undone. I already had a hammer drill, so it wasn't too difficult to do that. Because I had this heat vent going into the basement, I ended up having to frame a soffit. And while I could have cut it short to give a little bit more space, it actually turned out to work out really well with the shower size and the position of the drain to have that soffit line up perfectly with the shower wall. I ended up going with OSB on the bottom. Looked at a lot of different options for framing that soffit, but wanting to make sure that it is perfectly level all the way across, no sagging. Being able to use OSB, which you know is going to be perfectly dimensional exactly the way you want it, and is going to be perfectly flat. All I had to do, again, the advantage here of having this little lip up here between the steel beam and on the top plate there, is I could cut my OSB. I don't have to get a perfectly straight line. I don't have to get a perfectly square line because I'm using the finished edges here on the edge of the soffit. and can position the OSB over, use my laser level, get it perfectly up, and then screw it off. I have a clean out up there, so I've got to leave room for an access plate that'll go up there. And then just did 1x3 strapping across the ceiling for when the drywall goes in. So was a little bit tricky given this is my first major framing job, but overall I'm pretty happy with the way everything came out. And yeah, that's that.